Well, it seems like you've made up your mind and are adamant about changing, the blue-haired lady stated as she looked at Ryuk, whose face remained as hard as a mountain. They had both argued FOT the past 3 hours now, but Ryuk wasn't budging at all. He was absolutely dead set on never bringing her back to his world. Well then, she said as she turned her back and slowly walked into the distance. Guess both of us will be stuck here for a long while then. I don't find your face repulsing, so I don't mind it. She walked off and Ryuk stood there for a while, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Be stuck here for a while. Stuck? Hey, hey! He called out, chasing after her figure and arriving by her side. You're breaking your word, he called out, and she raised an eyebrow. And in what way am I doing that? This is a realm you created for someone to defeat the spawn of Eternal Warlock of War. I have done that, and now, according to protocol, I should be returned to where I came from. Something you are denying me. You're essentially breaking your own words. She giggled. Oh please, you defeated the spawn of war. Okay. But I never really said I would return you back to your world for free. Did I? Just take it as a final test. Bring me with you to your world, and you get to leave. We can split up after we both arrive in your world, she said calmly, making it look like a small deal. Like there's a way in the world I would bring back a monster with an unknown power level to Endearth. Endearth is already flooded with wars with the Nulls and other interdimensional beings. Why would it want another headache, which is you? Ryuk stated, as the lady paused in her steps. The Nulls? She said, and Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows. Are those guys that popular? If your world is under attack by Nulls, then that means it's a wild world, not under any major celestial power. Worlds under celestial power? Ryuk asked, and she nodded. Yes, most worlds are under the power of celestial beings, giving them a free ticket that ensures those chaos-born Nulls and other world-consuming inhabitants won't feast on them. If your world is being attacked by Nulls, it's because you have no ticket from a celestial power. In short, you are an unidentified world, something you might as well call the wild. If your world is unidentified, then it's only a matter of time before you're turned into a dark Gomer by them. Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows. A dark Gomer? He asked. Yes, a dark Gomer. A chain of worlds with no life, having been conquered by the Nulls and turned into a cultivation spot for their kind. You are fighting the Nulls but don't understand what a dark Gomer is? Seems like you have zero idea of who your enemies are or what they're fighting for. Even worlds that know almost everything about them have been conquered with their unstoppable power. I don't see any chance of a world like yours surviving at all, she said, looking at him in pity before walking past him. Ryuk paused in his steps, his hand outstretched but hanging in the air. Hey, system, Ryuk thought. It seems the entity knows more about worlds than the host or Endearth does. A dark Gomer truly is in my database, although its meaning is only given to me now after she mentioned it. And it correlates with what is in my database. She knows what she's saying. The system confirmed as Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows, pausing in his steps for a long time. She knows more about worlds than I or Endearth does. She knows very well about the Nulls too, including the powers that govern the worlds. If Endearth had someone like her on its side as it fights against the Nulls, our chances of winning might just jump up to another notch. But there's a problem. I don't know why she wants to come to Endearth, and no matter what her answer is, she can decide to run amok once she arrives there. Right now, I can sense her power level is just about mine, perhaps a bit higher because I can't fully sense it. But somehow, I feel like she's vastly stronger, almost like a person who has, yes, host, she has been crippled and lost her powers. According to the waves she's unconsciously sending and the system scan I'm picking up right now, she's only about 30% of her true power. The system's words made Ryuk inhale sharply. 30% of her true power, and she's already at the cataclysm stage? Then what will 100% of her power be? This is a person whose true power exceed the eternity stage. That realization only reinforced his fear of bringing her back to Endearth. Sure, her knowledge might be an important aid to Endearth in their war against the Nulls. But there was also a possibility that she might be the end of Endearth too. There was no guarantee that she would remain on their side. Why would she choose to help them? Because he brought her back? Now that's just a stupid way to think. Right now, she was seeing him as a deal or a ticket to get her out of this place. Could it be? That's the trick here. Ryuk mused to himself as he looked at her retreating figure. And that was when it dawned on him. This lady was stuck here. She needed someone to defeat that spawn of eternal war for her to be free, to leave and move again. And Ryuk had done that. But still, she needed a wormhole to get back to the real world and remain unstuck from her domain. In that respect, Ryuk was the only one who could do that because he had the vial, and the teleportation rune was in the forest area. If she wanted to leave, then Ryuk was her best bet. And if Ryuk wanted to leave, she had to take him to the forest area, something only within her control. But because they both needed each other to accomplish that goal, they wouldn't be owing each other anything after it. And that would give her the perfect chance to run amok on Endearth. If she regained her cultivation base, then Ryuk would essentially be helpless if she ended up destroying or causing serious harm to Endearthians. It was a risky bargain. I need something, a tool to bargain, a tool to place her under my will, or at least restrict her movements a bit. I can use brute force now, but that won't always hold. If she regains her power, I might not be able to hold her back, or worse, I could be defeated by her. Brute force isn't enough alone. I need to think. Ryuk mused to himself. That was when a notification flashed. Shop. Artifacts tab. Contract Grimoire. A page that makes everything written on it unbreakable. Breaking it will usually result in intense loss to whoever does so, sometimes even reaching as far as death. Requirements. Only 2 people can use the contract page, and they must be equal in cultivation or at the same power level. If one power level is too high compared to the other, there's a chance that the contract will be broken with minimal consequences for the stronger one. Price. A drop of life essence blood from both parties. The system suddenly came to Ryuk's aid as his eyes flashed, locking onto the notification. Genius. This is just what I need. With this contract, I can force her into a deal that she won't be able to break easily. Ryuk thought to himself, and in an instant he spoke out loud. Okay, fine. Immediately, she suddenly materialized like a ghost by his side, a beaming smile on her face. You finally agreed? She asked, her excitement evident. Ryuk rolled his eyes. Only under one condition. He stretched out his hand, and a golden-colored paper appeared, inked in slashes of red and black. The paper flashed in her eyes as she let out a surprised gasp. A contract grimoire? How did you? Yes, it's a contract grimoire. If you want me to get you out of this prison, then you must agree to my deal and sign the paper, Ryuk said as she looked doubtfully at the page for a while before eventually nodding. What are your terms? She asked. Simple. You listen to my will for as long as we are on Endearth. That's the only way I can make sure I don't bring back a threat that will bring death to my people. In exchange, she asked, I'll bring you with me back to Endearth, Ryuk stated, making it as clear as possible. But he was shocked speechless when he saw her suddenly bite her finger. Then, she flicked her hand toward the book, a blue drop of blood splashing onto it. The page lit up with a bright golden light. Fine, she said. A drop of blood left Ryuk's finger as well, drifting into the book, which vibrated with a brilliant dark and golden light before it disappeared into the empty void. You agreed so easily? I thought you would try and argue the terms a bit, Ryuk asked in shock, but she only chuckled. Oh, you're very naive. Don't you know a contract grimoire can be broken? You might not know, but compared to my true level of power, my current power is like a drop in an ocean and just about yours, she said with a smirk. Once I get back to your world, I will find a way to increase my power level. No doubt, I'll become vastly stronger than you are. Then I can simply reach into the contract core, find the page, and break the contract due to our massive power difference. What? You're from a lower world, aren't you? That means you're most likely already nearing your full potential. My guess. A couple of months from now, and your stupid contract will be broken by me. And you can't go back on it anymore. Once I break your contract, I'll finally regain my freedom, and then you will be the one under my will. She smirked as Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows. But of course, I understand you're just worried about your world. Still, a lower world dreaming of standing against the Nulls is pure fantasy. I don't intend to harm your people. They would all be turned to ashes by the Nulls anyway. Once I regain my true power, I will leave Endearth for an upper world. She giggled loudly, her laughter ringing through the void as Ryuk looked at her for a while, his expression showing surprise. This only made her giggle more, but Ryuk had only smiled in his heart. Already near my full potential? He thought to himself as he laughed darkly. My potential is an abyss that will most likely never get filled until my own death. You have no idea what you just got yourself into. Well now, Host has a new servant. The system's voice rang in his mind as Ryuk grinned. He had expected her to negotiate the terms of the contract. Maybe something like she wouldn't be able to harm an Endiarthian. That would have been the expected move. But Ryuk had devised something bigger so they could negotiate about it until they reached a level of agreement. Who would have thought she would instantly agree to become a slave to his will, simply because she believed that in a couple of months, she would regain her power and become stronger than he was, thus breaking the contract. Ryuk already knew the contract could be broken if he allowed her to grow strong enough. So, there was no way he would let himself stall behind her for long. And her guess of him being close to his potential due to being from Endearth was just ignorance. Ryuk might call his world Endearth, but he knew well that he was not an Endiarthian. He wasn't born here. He was an hybrid of two of the most powerful races in the universe. His potential was an abyss. Even he himself wasn't sure if he would ever fill it until he died. She had just essentially signed herself to his will for as long as he lived. Well then, what are you waiting for? Let's get going already, she said, dropping to one knee, pressing both palms onto the ground. Soon, a runic portal appeared beneath her. Ryuk slowly stepped forward. Finally, it's time to go back home. I wonder how things are back in the real world. Standing on the vortex, Ryuk exhaled deeply as Isha disappeared back into the pet world. The blue-haired lady also rose, the vortex beneath them spinning. But then, a sizzling sound, as if water had been thrown into fire, rang out. Ryuk looked beside him, feeling his hand grabbed by the blue-haired lady. But just before he could voice out his confusion, his body suddenly became wobbly, as if he were jumping onto water. The entire world froze for a couple of seconds before everything came to a stillness, and Ryuk felt his feet touch solid ground. Beside him were the towering trees of the forest, the chirping of birds filling the air. He almost jumped in joy. We're back at the forest, Ryuk mused, looking around. Immediately, his eyes locked onto the distance, where he felt the connection to the wormhole he had used to arrive here. Without hesitation, he shot forward toward the area. You! Wait for me! She called out as she rapidly ran after Ryuk, whose body weaved through the trees with ease. Soon, he arrived before the teleporter, but his gaze dimmed when he saw it. When he had first arrived, Ryuk had torn apart the castle the Hurega bees had built over the wormhole. Now, another castle, this one even grander, had been reconstructed in the same position. Guess I'll be crashing through their castle twice, Ryuk mused to himself before shrugging away any pity he had for them. These things had almost stung him to death the first day he arrived. He was already being merciful by not wiping them out of existence entirely. Hey, can you slow down a bit? She asked. Ryuk turned to look at the blue-haired lady. She had somehow lost that aura of high-profile elegance that usually surrounded her. Her hair was in disarray, branches of trees clung to her hair, and hot air puffed out of her lips. Ryuk looked at her oddly. It was just a simple run, he replied innocently. Simple run? Since when was the last time I even ran? Just tell me before you sprint off next time. Okay, ma'am, will do, Ryuk replied sarcastically before dipping his consciousness into his spatial ring, quickly retrieving a vial. His gaze turned toward the buzzing bees, who had started noticing them and were immediately swarming forward in attack. But Ryuk's expression didn't change in the slightest as he slowly strode out, stepping toward them with a simple will. Harden. All of the bees paused mid-flight, their wings held in a frozen stillness. Seems like my will control has really improved, Ryuk mused as he began walking forward through the silent swarm. What he had done was simply harden the space around the bees in a circular format, causing each of them to become completely motionless. A clever way of shaping space into something tangible. Now, he was using it to form a barricade around the bees, one they couldn't cross. Arriving before the bees' newly built structure, he slowly raised his leg and delivered a single kick, sending the entire thing flying 30 meters straight before it shattered into pieces. Ah, so refreshing, Ryuk mused with a bit of a chuckle before bending down to the teleporter. He popped the vial's cap and poured the blue-red liquid onto its surface. Immediately, the liquid spread through all the intricate rune lines before fading into them. Everything remained silent as Ryuk watched on, but the same couldn't be said for the lady beside him. "Hey, that's it? Where's the teleporter?" she asked, but Ryuk kept his gaze fixed on the teleportation platform, though even his heart was hammering like a gong within his ribs. The last thing he wanted was to get stuck here after all his troubles. But his worries were for nothing. A dark pillar of light suddenly burst forth, piercing through the sky. Ryuk flashed a smug grin. "Quick, it won't be open for long," Ryuk stated as the light slowly coalesced back onto the surface of the teleporter, and a vortex slowly spun to life. "What's your name, anyway?" the lady suddenly asked as Ryuk watched the vortex take form. "Ryuk," he replied curtly. "I'm Asteralaxia," she said, rolling her eyes at Ryuk. As the vortex fully formed, Ryuk signaled to her, and without hesitation, Asteralaxia jumped in, disappearing into the vortex. Ryuk followed right after, and quickly the vortex closed behind them. The moment they disappeared, the space around the bees lost its hardened state, and they immediately flapped toward the teleporter, trying to chase down the one who had destroyed their home. But the vortex suddenly closed on the fastest ones, severing their necks and waists in the process. The rest of the surviving bees buzzed in anger before they reluctantly restarted their home building. Hopefully, that evil white-haired thing never visits again. The sensation was just as Ryuk had felt before, the world coming to a frozen stillness, yet his insides being filled with the sensation of flying rapidly through something. Through this pitch darkness, he could faintly sense a figure flailing around near him. Ryuk stretched out his hand into the dark space, grabbing her and stopping her from tumbling any further. He didn't know why she wasn't balanced like him, but the last thing he wanted was for the teleportation to fail. The silence stretched longer than usual, sizzling sounds ringing out curiously, before finally, light was revealed once more. Ryuk felt himself being thrown outward, but he skillfully rolled in the air before landing crouched on the ground. A louder impact resounded nearby. He turned to the side. 2 legs wobbled in the air, and a head, half buried in the rocky ground, was Asteralaxia. Asteralaxia finally pulled her head out of the ground, her face swollen in anger. Slowly, she turned to the side, finding Ryuk standing there, completely unharmed. "You? How? You cheater!" she exclaimed as she stomped toward Ryuk and threw a punch, which stopped midway. It froze 5 centimeters away from Ryuk's chest, the space around him having hardened. "It's not my fault you seem to have a bit of bad luck, is it?" Ryuk smirked. "Tisich," she said, clicking her tongue before ignoring him and straightening her long blue hair. "Also, you have to do something about that hair. It's literally dragging on the floor and grabbing attention." Ryuk said this to her as Aster returned to her hair. Disgust flashed across her face when she saw the dirty ground, and quickly, her hair began weaving itself as she moved her fingers in inches, forming it. Ryuk stared at her for a while before sighing. "She's serious trouble. How do I explain her to the academy? And I can't hide her too," Ryuk thought before his gaze flickered. Instantly, he placed his attention on his shop interface, and immediately, his Apex watch appeared in his hands. Ah! Ryuk called out in excitement as he wore the watch back on his arm. Instantly, the watch activated, and thousands of notifications flooded forward, but Ryuk ignored them all. Instead, he quickly navigated to the calling space, where he found Mad White's contact list. I'll just call Mad White. Better for him to see you first than those grumpy academy officials. He muttered to himself as he dialed the number and raised the Apex watch to his ears, his heart pounding in his chest. It was truly good to be back. The sound of ringing echoed through the air before the call went through, and Ryuk spoke up. "Hello?" he said, but there was no reply. "Hello? Mad White?" Ryuk asked again, but silence followed. Before, suddenly, a voice came through. "Who are you?" The voice was unbearably heavy, weighing down on the air. Even Aster turned her direction to Ryuk's watch, staring at it. It was as if a demon had spoken from the depths of hell, causing Ryuk's heart to spike in alarm. This was unlike the calm and playful voice of Mad White. "Mad White? You're in turn? Remember?" Ryuk asked desperately, and he heard a gasp of shock reverberate through from the other side. Ryuk? The voice called out, still as heavy as ever. But this time, Ryuk sensed that connection. The person he was speaking to was Mad White. "Mad White? It's really you? Why do you sound like you're just a couple of inhales away from death induced by too much lava coffee draining?" Ryuk joked, chuckling. But then, Ryuk. Yes. Oh my God. This is very good. Listen. I need you to listen very well. Okay? Mad White said, his tone causing Ryuk to furrow his brows. Without hesitation, he disappeared from where he was, appearing 100 meters in the air, solidifying the space around him, moving away from Aster to avoid letting her pick up on his conversation. "I'm all ears." "Good. Firstly, where are you now?" Mad White asked, and Ryuk replied instantly. 100 meters above the runic transportation line. "Oh, you just came out. Good. See, right now I'm in chains. Everyone I know has been disconnected from my Apex watch, but because of your disappearance into that portal. They couldn't lay hands on your Apex watch and disconnect. That's the only reason why I'm able to talk to you now. Listen. Mad White called as Ryuk inhaled deeply. "I'm all ears, Mad White." "Good. Right now, I'm at the headquarters of the Titan family. Underground. That's where I'm locked. But that doesn't matter. Right now, in Grade B, a total of 7,000 human warriors are being sent to the front line against the battle with the Nulls. They're being sent to their deaths, Ryuk, by the 10 families. The human leaders have been forced down with their power and turned into their chess pieces. I have no idea how long I have been in this place, or if humanity has already begun warring with the Nulls. But I need you to stop those 7,000 soldiers. They have no idea what they're walking into. It's not a beast horde like they've been told, Ryuk. It's a battle with the Nulls. This is the first confrontation with the Nulls, and they're pushing humanity's strongest warriors to the front, using them to test their strength. I don't know anything about your current state, Ryuk. I hope you're well, but please, in any way you can, stop those men. And if there's already a war, save as many people as you can. They are humanity's last card for ever surviving the war." Mad White called out as fast as he could, and Ryuk's eyes flashed with hundreds of emotions. Shock. Yet he rained down the questions as he asked, "Where, Mad White? Where are you now?" "The Titan family base, in what city grade?" Ryuk asked, but he was cut short. "I want you to move to Grade B right now, Ryuk. If you come to Titan City, you won't survive the guards placed here. And don't worry about me. I can still breathe. Go now. And don't let the Academy know of your return. They aren't on humanity's side right now." "Hey, is that the prisoner speaking?" A voice suddenly resounded, followed by the heavy sounds of footsteps and shouting from the other side. "Need to." Mad White's voice resounded before getting cut off, and Ryuk stood in the same stunned position. He moved his hand, trying to dial Mad White back, but he paused, his fingers hovering over the screen. "If I dial him back, his Apex watch will be noticed, and I'll be sensed. I'll lose contact with him. Ryuk analyzed, his eyes flashing as he turned his gaze toward the distance, where he could already see the protected buildings of the academy. Grade B. The Null War is about to happen in Grade B? Shit! Ryuk called out in urgency as he flew downward at full speed, appearing before Aster. What's WR? Aster called out, but all she got was, I'll be giving my first order to you. Do not end the life of an Endiarthian. By the will of the contract grimoire. Ryuk ordered, and in an instant, a circular golden circle appeared on Aster's forehead. A sign that the will had been properly placed. I already told you, I can't be bothered, Aster said, a faint displease in her mouth when she felt the forcing action on her forehead. And Ryuk nodded. Now he had her under control, some control, and he could move without any worries. I need to be somewhere, as fast as I can. So, I'm coming with you, Aster said before he could say anything else. Ryuk didn't have much time to debate, so he agreed. He also didn't feel safe leaving her alone. Better if she was where his eyes could observe her actions. Good. Instantly, a powerful wave of energy emanated from Ryuk's body, the space around him instantly shattering into thousands of fragments, blown apart in a circular wave. Ryuk's eyes flashed in shock. What did I? Host is forgetting that End-Earth is a lower world. The host's small actions will cause an incredibly vast amount of destruction here due to the low grade of the world. The floor isn't hard, nor is the space. The system's statement made Ryuk's eyes flash. It was always like this when he arrived in the domain where the world was countless times stronger and he had felt himself irritably weak. Now that he had returned, and his strength had increased by countless times, the space now seemed like nothing but gas to him. Do you plan on running? I can't run, Aster protested, but then, space exploded into nothing as Ryuk rushed forward with speed, the air blowing around him like a powerful storm. And in less than a split second, he had disappeared completely, leaving nothing but a single arc of collapsing space in his path. Tearing through the sky with sheer speed, in his hands lay none other than Aster, whose eyes flashed in shock at the horrific velocity. She saw Ryuk racing forward at impossible speeds, shards of space exploding all around him. You! She muttered, her face growing red when she found herself in a princess carry in Ryuk's arms. But his serious and worried expression made her swallow back her words. Right now, Ryuk had a singular vein popping on his forehead as he braced forward with speed. They locked up Mad White and sent humanity to die on the front lines. Damn it! Damn the 10 families! Ryuk thought with gritted teeth as his speed increased to nothingness, cracking space into nothing. But such a speed was something that was easily picked up by the Academy, which instantly saw the devastating space cracks in the air, spreading into the distance. What is that? Some of the instructors asked, as presence beings appeared in the air, looking in shock at the space cracks that struggled to repair themselves. We need to warn the Academy. An unidentified presence on the level of X danger has been discovered. Grade B. Grade B. Ryuk repeated under his breath as he felt the world flash past him. Quickly, with a swift movement, he arrived 10,000 meters above a bustling city. His eyes easily pierced through the crowd, seeing a few aircraft hovering in the air. Instantly, he disappeared into thin air, suddenly appearing before one of the aircrafts. You! What the? An elf man, dressed in a white pilot uniform, said in shock as Ryuk suddenly materialized before him, his hand grabbing his throat and raising him high into the air. Tell me, what is the direction of Grade B? Ryuk demanded, a horrific pressure descending upon the elf man, whose eyes flashed in ultimate horror as he unconsciously pointed his hand toward the far side. In the next instant, he was dropped onto his knees before being blown away by a storm of powerful air as Ryuk shot into the distance. It's faster this way. The plane, they'll only slow me down, Ryuk mused to himself. He had seen the airships heading to Grade B, and he could have easily snuck into one of those. But right now, Ryuk was faster than a plane by many times. His current speed of movement was touching the outer limits of Mach 20. The airships would only move at Mach 4 or 5. Not something that would help Ryuk get there any faster. He was met with nothing but an endless area of ocean in 1 second. Then it changed into one of land in the next second, endless savanna in the next, forested land in the third, but he didn't stop, continuously moving. His ears kept twitching, picking up every sound he could possibly hear. And quickly Ryuk sensed it. A far, barren land of mountainous cracks echoed with the roars of creatures, along with bullet-shooting resonance, followed by incredibly powerful explosions that rattled into the sky with various elements. There! Ryuk called out as he instantly changed direction, soaring toward the area. A little less than 5 minutes, and he was already there. He looked down below, finding the scene where a hot war was currently ongoing. There were drones in the air, seemingly observing the war below. And it was a war between two groups. A group Ryuk knew well, humans dressed in various advanced cybertech suits, wielding large weapons. And another group, the most detestable yet terrifying creatures Ryuk had ever seen in his life. His eyes flashed as he sensed the creatures, his crimson eyes turning fully blood-red. Yet he forced down this anger as much as he could, turning into a flaming meteor that blasted downward toward the battlefield. The destructive force he brought along with him was enough to rip apart the drones, which acted as satellites to broadcast the war. The waves of power rippled everywhere, and Ryuk moved downwards. The friction and heat were unbearable, causing the war to come to an abrupt stop as he appeared high above in the air. And then, a beastly roar surged through the entire battlefield as some of the null creatures were blown backwards. Their entire bodies quivered from the sheer power of the roar. But surprisingly, the humans remained unaffected, much as Ryuk had intended. The aura around them, boom! A gigantic chasm appeared on the ground, reaching after what eyes could not see as Ryuk appeared floating just above the ground, standing a few meters before the middle of the clash. The humans stood behind him, the nulls in front of him, baring their maws. And Ryuk's eyes turned incredibly cold as he slowly turned his gaze behind him. Every human behind me should go back into their respective spaceships and return to their base. Now! This isn't what they said. In one of the biggest warships, amidst the thousands of others, was a group of about 5 individuals. 4 men and a woman, horror and shock in their stares as they looked into the distance. There, a dark runic line had suddenly appeared, resulting in a vortex, and from within it came an abysmal group. They seemed no different from mutated beasts, except they all radiated abyss-like energy that came with intense darkness. All of the apex energy in the air seemed to get devoured by them, their aura sending incredible chills and the stench of death even to the commanders standing aboard. We were ordered to go to Grade B to face a horde of B-grade mutated beast. But these are nulls. A white-haired, lanky commander stood in shock, shaking in his boots. We'll call the higher-ups and inform them of the discovery. The nulls have awakened, a burly commander stated as he dialed a number on his device. Immediately, a hologram appeared in the air, where a bald-headed man with sharp eyes could be seen, crackling with blue energy. Supreme Commander Forian. The commanders called out in respect as they got on one knee. What is it? The man replied, his voice snapping like a thunderclap. Behind you, Commander. The man stated, and as the Supreme Commander's holographic figure turned around, he saw the group of nulls slowly leaving the ripped open dark vortex, emerging towards them. The nulls? The Supreme Commander swallowed hard. Yes, Commander. The nulls have awakened. This is not a Grade B mutated beast, as we were told. If our troops engage now, we have no idea how large this portal is or what it could contain. But having 70% of our entire troops wiped out is very well within the realm of possibility. We hope you can grant us the permission to retreat, involve the other races, and make a plan to combat. A burly, red-haired, instinct-driven soldier stated to the man, who looked at the group of nulls, his gaze filled with sorrow, shifting into that of anger. A hint of helplessness flashed in his eyes, only to be erased by a firm resolve. Supreme Commander. A voice called from behind, alerting Furion as he slowly turned his gaze to the 5 kneeling commanders. And with shaky lips, he ordered, "Do not retreat. Engage the Nulls with every firepower you possess. Go all out and stop them." Supreme Commander Furion commanded, and the commander's eyes shook in shock. "What? Supreme Commander, we will all be wiped out," the only female commander stated, but Commander Furion remained adamant. "This is my final order. Engage the Nulls and survive as long as you can. The top 10 families will send their troops to aid you. Until that happens, you can only engage. Retreating will not be allowed," Supreme Commander Furion said before his hologram disappeared, leaving the room in silence as the commanders looked at themselves in disbelief. They were asked to engage Nulls? Truly, this was one of the best forces of the human army, if not the strongest. But against a vortex of Nulls, whose depth they had no idea of. This was as well as suicide. "What do you say, commanders? Should we retreat now?" A voice echoed through the spaceship as the commanders gritted their teeth in anger. They had been given the order by the Supreme Commander. An order from a Supreme Commander could not be turned down. "Unleash all force and weapons we possess. Arm the warriors to the teeth. We will engage," a commander replied, and silence fell on the other side. Then, the sounds of weapons being loaded filled the air. "Yes, Commander." The voices resounded as the communication line cut off. The table gave way as Commander Ruda slammed his fist on the shipboard, gritting his teeth in anger as he watched human troops begin leaving their ships, sliding downward, and the fighter jets all began moving. This is suicide unfolding," he said through clenched teeth as he watched helplessly, his troops charging toward the Nulls. The fighter jets sent their missiles, dropping them toward the enemy, causing violent explosions. Yet, his eyes widened in horror as most of the Nulls grabbed the missiles with their bare hands, crushing them into nothing. Cold sweat ran down his face. They were outmatched in strength, brutally outmatched. And with the way the Nulls kept pouring from the vortex, they were also outnumbered. "Damn it! Damn it!" he roared in anger. But it all paused when he saw the air pressure in the area suddenly increase. Then, an incredibly deafening roar boomed out through the entire battlefield, stopping the humans and Nulls alike dead in their tracks. Ruda's eyes widened in shock as he looked at the new visitor, a young-looking human with exceptional height. At his appearance, even the Nulls seemed to stop, and one could see the space around him shaking, shattering from the sheer force of an invisible pressure radiating from his body. "I command every human behind me to go back into their respective spaceships and return to their base. Now!" Ryuk's voice resounded through the entire battlefield, ringing clearly in the ears of the commanders, who all paused in shock. "We have been given orders from the Supreme Commander to engage anyway. Is your command coming from the Supreme Commander? Who are you to order us around?" Commander Ruda immediately asked. But Ryuk didn't have the time to entertain the blind human troops. They were stuck with the order given to them, but he didn't give a damn who the Supreme Commander was and who wasn't. He wouldn't sit here and try to convince them that they would die here, something they already knew. And instead of saying any more words, Ryuk faced the humans, whose hearts dropped in their chests as he slowly spread his arms apart, and then an incredibly powerful shockwave whirled outward from Ryuk's clap, strong enough to send all of the fighter jets flying, spinning backward, along with the humans who charged forward. A powerful storm ravaged the entire battlefield, sending the edges of the harsh spacecraft into the distance. But Ryuk also knew not to harm the humans, so he restrained his overwhelming force, redirecting the brunt of the power away from their troops, ensuring those who were about to be hurt were caught in a hard wave of space and protected. When Commander Ruda reopened his eyes, he found the sight of the troops floating in the sky, and he held onto his scanner, his lips parting in disbelief. We've been sent 1,000 miles away from the battlefield. With only a single clap? Our satellite communications have been cancelled. All connections to the area have been shut down. What the hell? The drones have been destroyed. All of them? An angered voice thundered from a group seated around a round table, eyes locking onto the huge figure who stood at the head, a device pressed to his ear, which he roared into. A large hologram had previously taken up the majority of the room, but it was now down, crackling with a myriad of lights as if it had been broken. But sir, the trackers placed on the human ships show that they have appeared in the Thunder Waters. That doesn't make sense. 1 second they were on the battlefield, and now it shows they are 1,000 miles away from it. Such speed is beyond the power of their aircraft in such an amount of time. It's like they've been moved. And so fast too. TCH. The man, a burly titan standing at about 3.5 meters in height, clicked his tongue as he threw the device in his hands against the wall, sending it splattering apart, reduced to nothing but ashes. Just when the true fun was about to happen, a female voice rang coquettishly in the background, coming from a lady dressed in crimson-red robes, her sharp ears and red eyes making it clear at first glance. She was a vampire. Well, what to do? We've lost connection to the battlefield, and the soldiers have been sent away. Should we be worried about nulls running amok amongst Grade B right now? It will only take about an hour or so before they reach the nearest settlement, and bring ruin upon it. A man with long green hair and pointed ears, an elf, called the group's attention from his seat at the high table. Or, he continued, we might start by thinking about how all of this went south. The Titan man took a deep breath, his eyes sharpening. Silence descended in the room before he began. According to the reports, the drones have been destroyed. All of them. And just so you know, those drones are some of the most powerful we have. All A grade, equipped with the best defense technology against threats that might try to tamper with them. We assessed the scale of destruction that would be left behind in the battle between the nulls and the humans, and we made damn sure that those drones wouldn't be shot down from the sky. Yet, all of them were instantly wiped out before they could even pick up on the one who did it. The Titan's voice was grim as the leaders furrowed their brows. Secondly, the human army. 1 second they were on the battlefield and the next they were in the Thunder Waters. A total distance of 1,000 miles, in less than a few seconds. The human's ship travel power has been assessed. Such a distance is beyond its capability in such amount of time. Yet the truth is what it is. If their ships can't move that fast, and yet they are there, it means they must have been teleported away. That's the only explanation. So, let's link this together. 1 second, our most powerful drones, resistant against the most powerful ATLs, were gone. And the next second, all of the human warriors were teleported away. What can we deduce from these observations? The Titan leader asked before taking his seat, silence reigning for a while. If one thing is certain, a voice rang out, coming from a golden-haired fallen man. That is that a new presence has entered the battlefield. Someone we never expected to be here. He paused, and then another voice spoke from his side. And he also seems to be on the side of the humans, teleporting them away when he could have just watched them die. The only human who's ever given us such problems is that bastard Mad White. Don't tell me he's out of prison again. The vampire lady ground her teeth, her crimson eyes flashing with rage as she looked at the Titan man, who silently took out another device and dialed. But then, after a moment, he placed it on the ground and shook his head. No, it's not Mad White. He won't be getting out of that place. It's a miracle he's even still alive in that condition. The Titan man's tone was certain as he placed the device down, and the leaders looked at each other with furrowed brows. Well, if none of our warriors are responsible, then just who? What other expert with such power could have interfered? We need someone to go to that battlefield and bring us information on our guest. Now! The Titan man slammed his hand on the table, sending cracks across the gem-like surface. Immediately, one of the leaders tapped on her device before saying, I've sent 2 of our most powerful spy scouts to the area. It will take them about 20 minutes to get there. Hopefully, our unnamed guest will still be there in 20 minutes. The Titan man's voice was low, and the room descended into silence once more. Yet a palpable pressure lingered in the air. This scenario of pushing the humans to the front lines of battle against the nulls was what they had been planning for years. Everything had seemed to go perfectly, and they had ensured thorough preparation to watch this fight and access the Null's power level. Only for their plan to come crashing down to embers. And what was worse, they had no idea who was responsible for such an interference. Except that he was on the side of the humans. There was a chance of another war brewing, with such a powerful force not being on their side, and lurking in the shadows. This is troublesome. Very troublesome. That thought echoed in all of the leaders' minds as each of them began typing into their communicator devices, sending various orders to their families. The war with the Nulls had begun. And now, there was a new presence in the game. You can't be planning to take on a vortex of Nulls all on your own, are you? The voice resonated behind Ryuk, none other than Aster, but her eyes flashed when she saw it. A dark crimson aura surged all over Ryuk, dancing on his shoulder. Ryuk's crimson eyes were now flaring with an incredible, murderous aura. Yet his face remained emotionless as he looked at the Nulls advancing toward him. Ryuk could see them well now. His worst foes. The creatures he hated the most in his life. The Nulls were a special group of creatures in that they were no different from mutated beasts. Even the Null that had killed Uncle Bob had taken the shape of a bird. And that was how the Nulls were. Some of them looked like tigers. Some looked like lizards. All took various animal forms with a few distinguishing features. Some had 5 legs instead of 4, some had 5 tails instead of 1. But if there was one true distinguishing factor between Nulls and mutated beasts, it was the shadows. Yes, the Nulls oozed out a strange, shadowy energy. It wasn't Apex energy at all. In fact, their energy was a devouring force. One that swallowed every trace of Apex energy in the air, consuming it to bloat its own presence. The life was drained away from the ground as they marched forward with ferocious intent. But Ryuk looked beyond them, to the dark vortex from which they had poured out. By the side of the vortex, his eyes could still see 5 gigantic fingers pulling the vortex aside, and allowing Nulls to pour out, though he couldn't see the body of the one to whom those hands belonged. All he knew was that it would be an incredibly gigantic being. And the aura from those fingers sent chills down Ryuk's spine. If you want to stop the Nulls, the first thing you ought to do is close that vortex. If you know a light vortex purifying art, you should be able to do that, Aster said to him. But Ryuk had his own plans. Seeing the countless Nulls rushing toward him, he slowly raised his hands. His ring finger interlocked with his middle finger, and then he whispered, "Domain expansion." The words, though merely a whisper, seemed to have been uttered through the loudest speakers, echoing through the entire world. Ryuk's lips parted once more, intense ice energy curling from his breath as he completed the incantation. Winter's solace. Immediately, the entire ground beneath him became covered in a complete world of ice and snow, which rapidly spread outward from beneath his feet. The frost expanded into the distance, reaching the Nulls and freezing them in place. Within seconds, everything became a frozen wasteland. The air around Ryuk turned into solid blocks of ice and stopped blowing. The Nulls themselves were paused within their steps, locked in their positions, completely encased in ice, unable to move an inch. Mana. -200. 5 more mana will be depleted with every second of domain activation. The system notification flashed as Ryuk stretched his hand to the side, a large ice sword forming in his grasp. And in the next instant, the ground beneath him exploded into nothingness as he surged forward with speed. Appearing before the frozen army of Nulls, his sword slashed outward, sending a storm of ice that instantly ripped apart every Null standing in his way. But Ryuk didn't stop there. He leaped, racing forward in a straight line, his ice sword cleaving outward toward the front Nulls and shattering them into pieces. An absolute massacre began as Ryuk weaved through their figures with breathtaking speed, sending bodies blasting apart in the wake of his movements. Powerful. His frost energy is very powerful enough to freeze lower Nulls in their steps. Just what grade of cultivation manual is he using? Aster thought to herself in shock as she watched the entire army of Nulls get taken out one by one. Ryuk's sword did not fail to reduce the Nulls to nothing. As he continued flashing forward, The system notification kept blaring red with light. He could feel himself moving closer and closer to the vortex. 30 meters away from it. Mana completely depleted. Domain will now be cancelled. Instantly, Ryuk's domain reeled back, and a loud splash echoed into the air, making it seem as if a rain of blood had been frozen. With the creatures no longer frozen, all they met was their own inevitable fate. But Ryuk had everything he wanted. He was now 30 meters before the vortex. A light purifying art? I don't have such a thing, he muttered to himself as he grinned widely. Immediately, Ryuk's disappearing ice sword lengthened even more, borrowing mana form Isha in the pet world, growing to nearly 10 meters in height. Then, he held it up, channeling every single bit of energy Isha possessed into the blade, causing runic lines to appear all over its surface. His gaze moved to the fingers pulling the vortex open. And then, fall! Ryuk commanded, and the gigantic ice sword fell down like the blade of a god, freezing space itself yet shattering it in the same moment. The fingers of the null reeled as if sensing the danger from its side. But instead of drawing it into the vortex, it took a sudden swipe at Ryuk instead. The attack detonated in his face, tearing through the air. But the claw never reached Ryuk before his sword, shot down, and instantly ripped apart the fingers. In that instant, the fingers fell out of the vortex, a powerful wave of dark energy surging outward from it. Ryuk could barely hear the muffled roar of pain and anger before the vortex itself twisted into a close, sucking itself inward, until it disappeared into nothing. Silence reigned completely over the area. Ryuk exhaled, cold air leaving his lungs before he turned his gaze behind him, finding only a single person standing there. It was Aster. But then, he noticed all of the nulls in the air, slowly fading into ashes as their enormous bodies disappeared into nothing. Surprisingly weaker than I expected them to be, Ryuk mused to himself, furrowing his brows before he made up his mind. Time to leave. Secret quest completed. Secret quest. Save the human army from eventual destruction has been completed. Rewards. 1. Plus 5 EXP. 2. Plus 15,000 purchase points. A reward quest for saving people? Not like you, system. Ryuk mused to himself, his gaze piercing into the distance. He scanned the battlefield, noting that the humans had not suffered many casualties. He was about to take a step forward and climb up when his eyes flashed. Wrapping himself in his will, he slowly began to levitate into the air. I can finally fly, he thought, feeling the weak space around him, making it easier to bend to his will. By wrapping my entire body in it, I can disrupt the flow of gravity, eliminating my weight. Interesting. Really interesting. Just as he was about to test his control, his gaze shifted to the far distance, where two figures covered in shadows moved rapidly in his direction. Surprisingly, they were walking within a layer of the void, making them harder to see, impossible even for any cultivator below the stage of cataclysm. Shadow walkers? I'd rather keep my presence unknown for now, Ryuk decided. His figure faded into thin air, and he reappeared before Aster. With a slight movement, the space around him cracked apart, and he vanished into nothingness, leaving in complete silence. The place remained eerily quiet for 5 minutes until two figures suddenly appeared, standing in the center of the sky. Their sharp gazes swept over the barren ground, now littered with remnants of ice and shadowy energy. Clear signs that the nulls had been here. But where are the nulls? These scars seem old? One of the shadow walkers muttered from beneath his robe. A device suddenly appeared in his hand, ringing with a loud hum. He picked it up. Tell me, how is it? Did you find the one responsible? A voice thundered from the other side. The shadow walker inhaled deeply. I'm afraid we're too late, Sir Death Shadow. What about the nulls? How close are they to the nearest settlements? They've what? They've all been wiped out, sir. What? Is it just me? Or does your world seem to have a little bit of chaos even among its own people? Aster's voice resonated through the top of the skyscraper, where Ryuk sat at the edge, his eyes locked on the horizon. His brows furrowed as he glanced at his Apex watch, only to sigh and turn his attention back to the view. Aster's voice managed to pull him from his thoughts, and he turned toward her, finding her looking below. "What's your plan, Aster?" Ryuk asked suddenly. Aster furrowed her brows. Below, she could see the various races, all seemingly different to one another. However, among them there was one race she looked like and could at least recognize, the small group known as humans. And in just the few minutes she had spent in this new world, she could already tell that the humans had weaker auras compared to the other races. A multi-race world, huh? She mused, slowly walking toward Ryuk. Something appeared in her hand, and she passed it to him. Ryuk frowned as he took the small blue card. It almost resembled a communication device, except instead of a screen, it was covered in intricate runic lines. "This acts just like that watch of yours." "A communication device?" Ryuk asked, but at that moment the system notification flashed. "System scan completed. Ancient tracking device has been found. Allows the other side to track the location of the one holding the device." "She wants to put a tracker on me?" Ryuk thought in surprise, but his gaze was filled with the same indifference. "Something like that," Aster responded vaguely. "I'll be leaving to explore. Seems like you have your own matters to handle, and I'll only cause you a headache by staying around. Goodbye now," she said before turning away, walking into the distance. Ryuk didn't try to stop her, watching as she leaped off the skyscraper and soared into the sky. A grin appeared on his lips as the system notification flashed once more. Host's nanobots have gained a new side skill, ability to hack both ancient and modern technologies through the use of nanobots. Host's nanobots have been scanned to be able to hack the ancient tracking device. Does Host wish to hack it? Ryuk made no reply. Instead, his fingers rippled, and tiny nanobots instantly entered the device's system. With a smirk, he effortlessly dissected its functions, turning them upside down while preserving its main purpose. The runic lines dispersed, and on the card now was an image of Aster, still gliding through the air, her eyes flashing curiously below. "Now I'm the one tracking you. With this, I can be at ease, knowing her location at all times," Ryuk mused, shaking his head. Aster thought she could trick him by making him believe he could use the device to contact her, when in truth, it was a tracker meant to reveal his location to her at all times. Unfortunately, she had underestimated Ryuk too much. Now, he had reversed the tool's purpose, yet left its original function intact. Aster could still track him. Ryuk left that so she would believe the device was working as normal, but she would have no idea that Ryuk could also now see her every move as well. Who? With that resolved, I need to figure out what the hell is going on. The Nulls have attacked. Their first attack, it seems. But it's only been a little over 6 months. The Nulls shouldn't be attacking this early. That's too soon. Ryuk mused to himself, his brows furrowed, as the system notification flashed again. Perhaps there is a different time flow in the domain compared to Endearth. If so, 6 months in the domain may be less, or more, time here in Endearth. Ryuk's eyes flashed. I really hope that's not true, but I need to decide. Should I leave for the academy, get my answers, find out how much time has passed, and understand what's going on, or should I head to? Ryuk mused as he brought out his Apex watch. Quickly, his nanobots once more began infiltrating it, and soon, he found what he was looking for. After tweaking a couple of functions on the device processor, a small map appeared. It was a map that displayed a green button and a red, beeping button. Titan City, Grade A? He muttered to himself. He had tracked down Madwhite's location using his Apex watch, and the map showed that he was being held in Titan City, Grade A. Madwhite said the Academy is really on the back foot of humanity right now. If I go back to the Ascension Academy, Lord knows what they'll do to me. If things hadn't gone south, Madwhite would have likely been able to get me integrated back in. But now that he's been captured, and I'm his intern, there's no telling if the Academy will welcome me with open arms. I need to know what went wrong with the Academy and Mad White, how much time has passed, and if Morgaine is still in the Academy. Ryuk mused, his brows furrowing at the last thought before he made his choice. But then, boom! 3 spaceships, bearing the insignia of the Ascension Academy, suddenly ripped past above his head, zooming at breakneck speed through the clouds toward the battlefield he had just left. So noticeable. Perhaps I shouldn't be zooming through the sky like that. Flying across the sky at such speed might get him tracked down. No one knew he was still alive, nor did they know he was back from his trip, except for Mad White, and he intended to keep things that way until he got some answers. For now, I'll just move to Grade A, while blending in with the civilians. With that decision made, Ryuk moved away from the top of the skyscraper and headed down the stairs. It was time to move to Grade A, Titan City to be exact, and he planned to do so discreetly. The plan: 1. Get some money. 2. Board a plane. Suddenly, his stomach rumbled loudly. Ryuk raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Took you long enough?" he muttered, clicking his tongue. Throughout his trip, his stomach hadn't screamed for food. But now that he was back on Endearth, it was demanding nourishment for some devil knows why reason. Well, I guess I'll do that first. Ryuk arrived before a door that led downward from the top of the skyscraper. Casually, he grabbed the knob and opened it, but what he saw almost blinded him. Yes, harder. Split me in 2. As soon as he processed the scene, Ryuk shut the door as gently as he could before silently slithering away, his legs unconsciously moving faster. It's a wild world we live in. Thank God for soundproof walls. Walking down the balcony, he quickly arrived at an elevator. Stepping in, he pressed the number 0, and in an instant he was zoomed downward. As the doors slid open, he found himself in a hall filled with well-dressed gentlemen and beautiful ladies, each carrying travel bags in groups of 2s and 3s. It seemed to be the balcony of a hotel. Ryuk made his way toward the glass doors, earning a few curious glances due to the combat suit he was still wearing. He had lost his original clothes, forcing him to jump into the combat suit Mad White had given him for the expedition. And now he was still wearing it. It wasn't exactly strange, but in a place where everyone else was dressed in business suits, and it was a bit out of place. Thankfully, no one stopped him. He made his way out with ease. As he walked down the streets, a couple of thoughts passed through his mind. He needed money to board an airline. Should I go robbing? They wouldn't even know they got robbed until hours later, Ryuk mused, eyeing a bank structure by the side of the road. With his current abilities, he could easily slip in and out, and not a single soul would even notice until he had taken every last penny the bank had to offer. But then, an image flashed in his head, and Ryuk immediately took his gaze off the bank, continuing his walk. No, I can't. Uncle Bob wouldn't be smiling if I did that. Rather starve to death than steal. One of his uninspiring philosophies, after all, he muttered, clicking his tongue. Then his eyes suddenly flashed as he remembered something. That bird Null. It wasn't among the Nulls I killed, that's for sure. Those Nulls were only comparable to Grade B beasts. That bird Null should be a grade at least. I can sense it, he murmured, recalling that night when the Nulls had brought chaos upon his world, burning it to nothing but cinders. Ryuk's fists unconsciously clenched at his sides, but a couple of seconds later, they relaxed. With the Nulls resuming their attacks, it's only a matter of time before I find that birdie bastard. I just need to take my time. With that final thought, he continued his path. Nightfall. It's getting really late, he thought, gazing at the half-moon in the dark night sky. Despite the hovering holoscreens scattered across the skyline, it was still nighttime, and the number of people on the streets had significantly reduced. Then, somebody suddenly crashed into him from the side. But they never truly made contact. Ryuk had solidified the air into a barrier, sending the person flying backward. They hit the ground, groaning in pain while clutching their head. Arf! Feminine groan. Ryuk's gaze calmly lowered to the lady who was crumpled on the ground, her expression filled with anger. She looked up at him, and a vein bulged on her forehead, but as soon as she saw his face, her actions halted immediately, unable to muster a single word with her jaws hanging on the ground, almost as if she just sighted a ghost. Ryuk, however, looked behind her instead. From the alleyway, a group of 3 men came running toward them. But the moment they saw him, they skidded to a stop, their brows furrowing dangerously. Meanwhile, the lady straightened herself up, her gaze briefly flickering to Ryuk's combat vest before she suddenly darted behind him, taking cover. Now what the hell have I gotten myself into? Bad goons at the front. A seemingly helpless lady behind him. The situation was just too much of a cliché. It was the typical hero situation, but when Ryuk looked at the cultivation of the men before him, he could only roll his eyes. The strongest of them was only at the core of the plane of ascension. That was almost not worth it. But then his eyes flashed as he looked at the lady, before he reconsidered and shook his head. The trio of men paused when they saw Ryuk, hesitating to move, looking at the battle suit he was in. Besides, the young human was so devastatingly handsome and exuded this dangerous aura that they could all feel. It was clear. This was no ordinary human being, but his next few actions surprised them. A gentle rustling of air echoed through the entire area, and in the next instant, Lydia's eyes widened when she felt her own legs dangling in the air in the blink of an eye. The body that covered her was no longer there, but now there was a firm grip on her shoulder as she turned her gaze to find her eyes staring at a glass-skin white jaw. Right now, Ryuk was holding her in the air, his arm by her shoulder. While she tried to struggle, her shoulder seemed to have been frozen in chill, stopping her from mustering any sort of resistance at all. What the? Just how the hell is he? She wondered to herself in shock, as Ryuk pointed his other hand at her face while looking at the men. This person is the one you want, isn't it? He asked them, and the men unconsciously nodded their heads. Well then, no problem. I'll hand her over to you. What? You can't do that. Lydia screamed at Ryuk's face, who slowly turned her gaze to her. Says who? That's not how things work in the book. I am the helpless princess here. You should be the hero and they are the bad guys. You can't hand me over to them. They want to take my virginity for God's sake. She screamed, but Ryuk only rolled his eyes. On one condition then, he said to the man who perked his ears. You can have her if you can offer more money than her. What? Lydia screamed once more, feeling her joy short-lived. She was about to go on another screaming spree, but it was like Ryuk couldn't hear her. He looked at the men, who locked eyes with the others before flashing themselves a smile. One of them laughed boisterously as he dipped his hand into his pocket, bringing out 3 bundles of star notes, which made Ryuk's breath hitch in his nostrils. Those are true notes. Not star coins, star notes. Ryuk thought, swallowing. An action that was seen by everyone as the men giggled loudly, and the one standing in the lead stretched his hand to the side, causing the other behind to bring 2 more bundles, making a total of 5 bundles. I can see you're a true young man of culture. Hey. Here, what do you say? 50,000 star notes. What do you say? He said, waving the money in the air, and Ryuk's greedy eyes followed fate. But then, hey! The scream rang in his head as the greed in his eyes faded a bit and he turned to the young lady, who snorted at the men. Don't mind these thirsty, lecherous bastards. I am Lydia Salvatore, the daughter of the mighty sire Alexander Salvatore, she declared with pride, as Ryuk looked at her for a while raising an eyebrow. What the? Don't tell me you haven't heard that name before. I actually haven't, Ryuk replied truthfully. Wow, Lydia said, looking at him as if he was a barbarian. The same look that the men gave Ryuk raised eyebrows, but then she shook her head. Anyway, what I'm saying is, my father is the CEO of the multi-billionaire company, Salvatore Royal Limited, and I'm the direct successor. When it comes to money, I can offer you millions. Compared to that, what are some petty 50,000 star notes? Wouldn't it be better to curry favor with me instead? She asked, as Ryuk thought about it very carefully, his eyebrows looking between the dangling 50,000 star notes before him and the girl's offer. With the way the men aren't saying anything to argue back, then she must have been saying some truth. Should I take the 50,000 star notes or take the million in promise? Ryuk mused to himself before he finally made up his mind. He spared Lydia off his hold, causing her to land on the ground, wobbling a couple of times before Ryuk finally grabbed her, stopping her from falling on her butt. Sorry guys, she won, Ryuk said as he turned and continued on his way. Hey wait, I didn't ask you to, the burly man said as he tried chasing after Ryuk. Only 4. He suddenly doubled backward, rolling on the ground a couple of times before he skidded to a stop, blood trickling down his nose. What just happened? The man thought the same for Lydia, as another goon ran toward Lydia to try and grab her hand, but mere inches from her hands, and he suffered the same fate after she suddenly seemed to have run into a wall, sending him crashing harder than the first one. Telekinetic barrier? Lydia thought in surprise as she reached her hand out and tried touching the barrier, but then a voice reverberated out. That thing will break after 5 more tries. I'd advise you to walk faster, Ryuk said as Lydia's heart thumped within her chest, and she quickly ran after Ryuk's figure, under the nagging gaze of the men who looked helpless as both of them disappeared into the distance. Elves' Sanctuary. Ryuk read out the words he saw from the top of the banner covered in weird, seemingly overgrown grass plantation high in the air, as the car slowly entered into the large gates, revealing a city of single-standing hut-like primitive buildings, mixed with an exceedingly modern and futuristic design. The City of Elves, huh? You know, you normally won't be allowed to step into the city. Ha ha ha. A laughter rang out from the driving seat. Ryuk turned his gaze to the elf driver who was driving the car. He was a middle-aged man, approaching the older side, with some wrinkles over his face, and he asked, "Why is that?" "Well, humans aren't allowed in without special access," the man replied to him, as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. If humans weren't allowed without having special access, then why was he inside it right now? "The only reason I agreed to drive you in is because of the one you are with, the young mistress, Lydia Salvatore. Who am I to deny if she brings a human home?" "Ha ha ha," the elf man said as Ryuk turned his gaze to the young lady sitting beside him. Her gaze was currently on the side of the glass, but then a frown appeared on Ryuk's face. "I'm curious about something, driver," he suddenly called out. "Ask away, young one," the elf man said with a chuckle, and Ryuk asked, "Do the humans have a city of their own?" he asked, a bizarre question that caused Lydia to take her gaze off the window to stare at him, the same as the elf man. "I think they also do, though not as popular as the city of the 10 racial families," the man answered as Ryuk nodded before asking the second question. "Okay then, I want to know, are you allowed to enter into the human city without a permit?" he asked, to which the elf man shrugged. "Of course, the human city allows all races in. There are no restrictions at all," he said, and Ryuk hummed, before having his gaze wander back to the car window. When he turned to look back at the hundreds of elf settlements that were passing by, somehow the beauty in them seemed to have been lost. Now they looked plain and boring. A human is not allowed into the elf city unless by permit, but every other race is allowed into the human's own city? Ryuk thought to himself. "I think I understand what you mean, young man. Ha ha ha." The boisterous laughter of the elf driver suddenly rang out as Ryuk turned his gaze to him. "It sounds a bit unfair when humans are barred from the elf city unless they hold special permits, but we can go into the human city as much as we like without needing anything, right?" he asked as Ryuk simply hummed. "Well, the reason is simple. Humans and elves might look alike, with the only difference being our pointy ears. But just because we look alike doesn't mean we're equal at all. We elves hold much power, much pure bloodline attuned with nature. We're different in hierarchy and life existence. For a human to enter our home is to be allowed into a sanctuary closest to true nature in this world, a chance to meet with a higher existence. They will need a permit to do that, so we don't just allow any humans to do so, taking it for granted. But if we pay a visit to the human city, it is considered a blessing. A higher life existence deciding to allow meetings with lower life existence. It is a cause worthy of honor. Why would we need a permit for that? He asked Ryuk, who simply hummed before going quiet. Seems like even the elves themselves hold that same superior gaze over humanity. He silently thought to himself. The drive didn't continue for much longer as Lydia voiced out for the driver to stop. And it did, before they both got out. Ryuk looked around him, finding himself in a quieter environment than he imagined. The elf houses were all huts in shape, and they didn't have compounds or fences, not much different directly from each other, save for size. The hut he was standing in was especially eye-catching, as it stood large compared to the others around it in mere size. He watched as Lydia slowly made her way towards the gate, opening it up before turning to look at Ryuk, who never moved an inch from where he stood. "I'll wait outside," Ryuk stated, but then she narrowed her eyes before replying. "It's already late. Things won't be safe for a human outside at night, and even if you're strong, no taxi will drive you out, and you can even get arrested by the enforcers without a permit. So, are you still sure you want to stay outside?" she asked Ryuk, who furrowed his eyebrows, thinking her words carefully, before he turned his gaze to the house. Immediately, a runic line appeared in Ryuk's eyes as his gaze sliced through the walls, assessing the entire structure of the building, and he couldn't help but scoff within himself before nodding his head. "Okay then, just for the night," he said before walking in after her. How naive. He's just another thirsty bastard after all. Lydia thought to herself as she watched Ryuk step into the house and she locked it. Ryuk stepped in, and the first thing he noticed was the smooth, polished wood beneath his feet, with handcrafted rugs covering it. The furniture was minimal, low wooden chairs with cushions made from some type of woven fabric, a small round table made of wood, and shelves with books, vases, and small trinkets at use. In the center of the room, there was a stone fireplace softly glowing with a flickering fire, filling the room with warmth and a gentle scent of pine and cedar wood. Natural light poured in through the wide arching windows, framed by some leafy-type vines that looked like curtains, yet not. On the ceiling, glowing lanterns hung, their light warm and inviting. The overall atmosphere of the building seemed peaceful and serene, somehow managing to calm the feeling of unfairness Ryuk felt building in his heart from the conversation he had with the driver. "Settle down, I'll make tea," Lydia said as she disappeared into a door by the side, and Ryuk looked at the closed door where she had disappeared before turning to look at the harmless-looking chair. Yet his eyes could see something weird about the chair, something that drew his smile, as he slowly walked towards the chair and sat on it. And that's when it happened. Immediately, he balanced on the sofa comfortably. Vines instantly shot out, first wrapping around his waist and just as quickly, another wrapped around his neck, drawing it back. The thorns on them were incredibly sharp, drawing a sting of blood from his neck. As he stretched out his arms to grab them, two more thorned vines shot out toward him, wrapping around his arms and pulling them apart. Two more vines emerged from the lower part of the seat, wrapping around both ankles of Ryuk's legs before rapidly spreading upwards. Eventually, he was completely wrapped up in those thorny vines, his movements locked completely. When he tried to struggle, he witnessed the vines tightening even more, drawing an interesting smirk in Ryuk's head. Interesting. A really interesting home protection mechanism. In the next instant, Ryuk felt a green flash of light. As he turned his eyes toward the center, he found that the formerly glowing red fireplace, which had been burning gently, was now flaring with a green energy. Alas, it wasn't a fireplace, but rather the power source that continued to empower the vines, making them thicker and heavier, more difficult to escape from. Most interesting of all, Ryuk could feel his own mana getting sucked away by the vines, seemingly weakening him with every passing second. The sound of the doorknob twisting open echoed as a figure slowly walked out of the door. It was none other than Lydia, carrying a tray with two steaming hot cups in her hands. "Well, coffee is here, just like I promised," Lydia said as she settled the tray on the table. She took one cup before settling down on the sofa opposite Ryuk, looking at his bound-up figure with an interesting smile. She watched as the human looked at the steaming hot cup of coffee and then back at his own bonded hands. Unconsciously, His hand tried to move toward the direction of the coffee, only to instantly retract as the thorny vines tightened even more, locking his arm down, drops of blood dripping onto the seat. Unfortunate that you can't reach the coffee, isn't it? Lydia asked, taking a sip of hers. This isn't what we agreed on, Ryuk stated, only for the vines on his neck to tighten further. Of course, what we agreed on. Let's discuss that. Lydia leaned back slightly. You saved me from those thirsty bastards of your disgusting human race, Lydia said as Ryuk raised an eyebrow. I'm pretty sure their leader was a werewolf? And after saving me, you requested 1,000,000 star notes. Ha ha ha. She gave a cold chuckle before continuing. Tell me, did you really save me? Or are you just hungry for money? Would you have really left me to those guys if I didn't have 1,000,000 to offer? Lydia asked, a disgusted expression on her face. Ryuk looked at her for a while before chuckling. You're right about many things and wrong about one. He leaned forward slightly. First, yes, I saved you. Or else you'd be bleeding all over your private parts right now. I've seen werewolves before, and I know the rage that runs through their blood. But here you are, sipping coffee, with your legs crossed over each other. I'd say you've been saved. TCH. Secondly, am I just hungry for money? Actually, I need to get to grade A, and to do that, I need a bus, which needs money. So yes, I am hungry for money. 50,000 star notes? 1,000,000 star notes? Yes, I'm hungry, and I would take it if I were paid with it. Thirdly, would I have let them hurt a girl for 50,000 star notes? No, I wouldn't. I'm not that pathetic of a human. I would have come to the rescue. The money was just a way to get paid for my hero job. Not a deal tool, Ryuk stated sharply. The vines tightened even harder on his neck, and Lydia snorted. Only a fool would believe all you just said. I didn't know humans were untrustworthy too. Not all, but most of them are. They're pathetic survivors, after all. They will lean toward whatever keeps them alive, throwing away any principle they might stand on, so long as they get to survive. That's how pathetic humans are, and you seem to me to be doing just the same. She took another sip of her coffee. Trying to sugarcoat everything because now you're in the weaker position. Lydia smirked as Ryuk raised an eyebrow, pondering her words, which, surprisingly, seemed to have a bit of sense in them. So, how about the 1,000,000? Ryuk asked. Lydia paused mid-sip, looking at him as if he was a fool. Are you really that dumb or just pretending to be naive? What? I'm throwing you out to the enforcers tomorrow. Entering the house of the mistress of the Salvatore royalties is enough to get you in jail for your entire lifetime. She scoffed. 1,000,000? Ha ha ha. Nature. It's been a long time since I've laughed so hard. Don't make me start now. Welp, now that's a bummer. Ryuk sighed, seemingly resigning himself to fate. Lydia raised an eyebrow. Anyway, you mentioned needing to get to grade A just now, didn't you? You said you needed to get there quickly and needed a, bus? Lydia asked. Ryuk nodded. I'm curious. Just where are you really from? She asked. Why? Because, what type of human thinks grade A is a place you can get to by bus, or train, or jet? She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. Grade A is banned from every Enderathian, except for a very low few. Even if you have 1,000,000,000, there's no guarantee you'll be allowed into grade A. Even the people who know where it is located can be counted on one hand. Ha! Ryuk blinked. Yes, Lydia said, rolling her eyes as she sipped her coffee. Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows. Now that makes some sense. Grade A is unlike the other grades. In fact, only the Ascension Academy I know is in grade A. Titan City. Grade A was what Mad White's tracking showed me. Is there a Titan City in grade A? The real Titan City should be in grade B, shouldn't it? Ryuk mused to himself, but then his eyebrows furrowed once more as he realized another important truth. The real Titan City can't be in grade A. It can only be in grade B, because the Titans wouldn't dare to keep Mad White in their own home, knowing well that if he breaks loose, thousands of their own would pay the price. Mad White might joke around many times, but I don't think he's that soft. One would be more wary of him than underestimate him. If so, then what is Titan City? Grade A? Or could the watch tracking be wrong? Ryuk wondered to himself with narrowed eyes, zoning out for a while under Lydia's stare. She looked at the human who was seemingly deep in thought, her brows furrowing more and more. Grade A? What does a random human dressed in a combat suit have to do with Grade A? With the way he's deep in thought, he didn't seem like he was bluffing at all. Only people on my father's level can dream about getting to Grade A. Just who is he? Lydia questioned with furrowed eyebrows, unknowingly having her interest piqued even more by the handsome yet greedy stranger. The greed in him, she understood, because he wanted to take a bus to Grade A, something he didn't even know was impossible now. She didn't know if she could call him guilty. Of course, he hadn't earned her good graces, but now he didn't seem as pathetic as he was before. At least his presence was more enduring. Ryuk exhaled loudly, following his thoughts like a smoky trail before making up his mind. I need to get back to Grade A. I was sprinting so fast before that I had no idea what the proper way even is. But I'll just have to follow my tracks and see if I can get there. When he was coming to Grade B from the teleportation area in Grade A previously, he hadn't truly known the direction of Grade B. He had just flown forward, trusting that when he found a person, he would be given directions to Grade B. That was how he had found the soldiers through that pilot. But what he had forgotten to do was look very well at the road, so he would know his way back to the academy, something he had failed to do because of the urgency of the situation. Now, he had no idea how to get back to Grade A, except by relying on his mere instincts to see if he could still remember. Something that might be possible for me, but no doubt will be time-consuming. Especially if I don't want to go blowing up space in the sky and getting discovered. He had thought he would get back to Grade A by simply taking a bus and mixing in with civilians. But now, it seemed his plan had failed before even starting. His only choice was to go running around now. Determined, Ryuk didn't see any sense in staying here any longer. He refocused his gaze, turning to Lydia, then noticed the change in her eyes. The disgust in them had lowered considerably compared to before. So, if you're saying 1,000,000,000 won't get you to Grade A, then that means there's no way to get to Grade A at all? He probed further as Lydia reclined in her seat. That's right, for people like humans. For a person like me, Grade A might be hard to reach but not impossible. My father operates businesses in Grade A. He sends people there every day. Lydia said with a shrug, as Ryuk's eyes flashed. Nice. Seems like I can still get there too. Ryuk stated, as Lydia scoffed. You? Get there? Did you forget I'm handing you over to the enforcers tomorrow? You're going to jail to rot, Lydia said, sipping her coffee and seemingly relishing the taste as she settled even more comfortably. She opened her eyes to find Ryuk looking all around her apartment with weirdly shaped eyes, and she unconsciously blurted out, What? Oh, nothing. I'm just thinking. Your father seems to be some high-profile individual, yet here you are living in some... this is cool, but I know where high-profile people live. I know what their living rooms look like, and this is just subpar to that. And the first time I met you, you were being chased by a gang of 3. Would the daughter of a high-profile individual be chased down an alleyway by rapists? So you're saying? She asked. You don't look like the daughter of a high-profile individual. Ryuk mused, looking at Lydia, who scoffed while smirking. How do I look, then? You look like one of those 9 to 5 workers who seems too grumpy to get a boyfriend and is struggling to take care of herself on her own. Merely getting through life, wages to wages, hours after hours. Home, work, back home, and seemingly stuck in that circle eternally. Ryuk stated, as Lydia's eye twitched repeatedly, steady anger rising in her, yet cooling off while looking at his honest expression, only for it to flare back up again. Has anyone ever told you that you have a slap-worthy mouth? She asked, as Ryuk shook his head. I might not look like much, but trust me, if those men had laid a hand on me, they and their entire families would have perished along with them once it got to my father's ears. Lydia said, as Ryuk shook his head. I don't think so. Those men seem to know you're the daughter of Alexander Salvatore, and yet they were still hitting on you, thinking you were a target. That means they can't be that scared of your father. If they knew their families would perish, would they still hit on you? They could be blinded by lust, but I don't think anyone is that stupid. Good night, hero, and thank you for annoying me so much. Tomorrow you begin your jail sentence. Lydia said as she rose from her seat, took her things, and stormed into her bedroom under Ryuk's raised eyebrow. An interesting individual, verily. Seems like she might be the daughter of a high-profile person, but they also don't seem that close. Why do the daughters of high-profile people find it hard to get along with their parents anyway? Ryuk wondered with furrowed eyebrows. He had noticed that sort of peculiarity first from his observation of the half-fallen one and Morgaine's relationship, and the same seemed to be appearing with this elf girl too. It was like a problem high-profile individuals faced, making sure their children liked them just as much as the masses did. Welp, Ryuk mused as he looked around the room, his gaze scanning across before settling back on the table where the steaming hot coffee made for him was still present. I guess I better down the coffee before it gets too cold, Ryuk mused to himself as he stretched out his right hand. Immediately, green runic lines appeared along the thorny veins that held him. They tightened, yet they couldn't stop Ryuk's hand from pausing for even a second before they instantly snapped apart into nothing from his pure arm force. He took his coffee, inhaling the fresh steam rising from it with a satisfied expression. She might be a pain, but she brews coffee well at least, he mused to himself, taking a gentle sip and feeling the soothing taste spread all over his throat. Immediately, Ryuk snapped away his left and right legs, along with the thorn binding his waist, before properly settling on the sofa. His legs rested over each other as he took continuous sips, his eyes closed in relaxation. Finally, after months of running around in the forest and getting trapped in the abyss, he could finally calm his nerves and savor the taste of something sweet within his throat. Suddenly, the sound of creaking rang out as Ryuk continued his gentle sip, only to be instantly alerted by the sharp gasp that followed, tinged with a bit of horror. Immediately, footsteps receded, and then the scattering of irons rang out from a different area of the room. This was followed by the sound of quick footsteps approaching from behind, and then, the sound of metal striking metal reverberated as Ryuk slowly opened one of his eyes, finding the bottom of an object mere inches away from his nose. What the? A frying pan? Ryuk called out aloud before chuckling, but Lydia remained steadfast as she slammed down 5 more times in just a few seconds. She withdrew in shock when none of the strokes even touched Ryuk at all. Sip. The sound of sipping rang out as Ryuk took another deep sip, his satisfied expression contrasting with Lydia's frustrated scream. You! How did you get out of the bondage? That's impossible, Lydia said, rising to her feet, her frying pan positioned in front of her like a sword. Ryuk sat upright, took another sip, then turned to look at the frightened little thing. Don't you dare come close, you lecherous bastard. I'd rather die than let an insolent human take away my first time. Lydia screamed, her face flustered. Ryuk raised an eyebrow. I'm not even 18 yet? Lydia's face dropped for a moment before she huffed. Like in hell I'll believe that. And hey, miss, you ever looked in the mirror before? He asked as Lydia raised an eyebrow. Why? Because you're not really as good as you think in your head? Ryuk replied calmly, causing a vein to pop on Lydia's forehead. You bastard. No, as a matter of fact, you're actually not that good-looking. I've seen women and ladies who are actually good-looking. You're like the bare minimum standard, Ryuk stated, this time with a very serious expression. Lydia's frying pan lowered slightly in surprise. She could see that the human didn't really have that much light in his eyes while looking at her figure. Right now, she was currently dressed in her thin pajamas, showcasing her nice curves and cups that would make most men drool. Yet the human eyes were just dull, almost lifeless, as he looked at her. He didn't even seem aroused at all, not even a tiny bit. And just that realization seemed to dim the pride in her body. The light in her life dulled just a little. Also, Ryuk said as he looked in between the open doors that led to her bedroom. Slowly stretching his hand outward toward it, an object was carried forward, passing by Lydia's narrowed eyes before floating upward into Ryuk's hand. It was none other than Lydia's device. "I need to have a word with your dad," Ryuk said. Lydia scoffed. "Dream on. You'll never get into my device without my..." "Welcome back, Miss Lydia." The tiny AI voice resounded from the device as Lydia's eyes widened in shock. "You were saying?" Ryuk asked with a smirk as he quickly navigated to the call center. His eyes landed on a number saved as Lecherous Dad. "Wow, who saves their dad's number with that kind of thing?" he asked. "Give me back my phone." Lydia screamed as she reached out, only for her hand to ram against a wall and send her stumbling 3 steps backward, wobbling on her feet. "Not again!" Lydia screamed, slamming her hand against the wall. A blue ripple appeared but didn't give way. After knocking into it 9 times, she gave up as she stared at it. It didn't even ripple anymore. "So, I wonder what I should tell him to allow me on one of his trains going to grade A? How can I convince him? Convince my dad? Ha 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 ha." Lydia laughed out loud in mockery as Ryuk raised an eyebrow. "My dad listens to no one but me, and I'll never help an annoying brat like you." She shot back with a huff, folding her arms, further accentuating her chest. Something Ryuk noticed, and he smiled evilly. "You know what? I have a pretty good idea." Lydia turned towards him, but then she found his figure towering above her. She hurriedly retreated, only to feel her back against the wall, and his body mere inches from hers. "If your dad only listens to you, then he must love you, doesn't he? Like, really, really love you. If so, then that's just perfect." What do you want?" Lydia asked, her voice tinged with despair, as the air in the room suddenly grew colder. Ryuk looked into her eyes. "I don't need much from you, Lydia. Just dial this number, call up your dad, and ask a simple question. Which train will be going to grade A tomorrow morning, and where is its location? That's all I need from you." "And what if I choose not to?" Lydia said, frost escaping her lips from the dropping temperature. Ryuk pressed his hand on the wall beside her head, bringing his lips mere inches from hers. "Then, I'm afraid an insolent human like me will end up being your first time. And just so you know, I'm rougher than even werewolves themselves," he whispered, sending a chill down Lydia's spine. More frost left her lips as her eyes flashed green, locking onto Ryuk's sinister expression. The silence became incredibly deafening to Lydia, and her gaze remained seemingly stuck on Ryuk. The choices echoed in her head. Call up that cheating bastard of a father, or have her first time taken by an insolent human. Anyone with an ounce of brain could easily choose one. In fact, it wasn't that difficult of a task. But looking at Ryuk, Lydia's breath grew hotter and hotter. She felt something inside her awakening, a wild desire, one that grew higher and higher with every puff of air in her nostrils as she looked at the face before her. He was an insolent human, yet he sent her heart into flames, filling her with desire. There was something about him different, something about him that sent her wild instincts failing. The space between them was shortening. He was moving forward, trying to force her into what he wanted, to call up her dad. But her body didn't want that any longer. No, it wanted more. And immediately, Lydia's eyes flashed with a bizarre green light as more frosty breath escaped her lips. She suddenly leaned forward. The air parted, a rustle blowing through the living room, as Ryuk shot backward with speed, appearing 7 meters away from where he had just stood. "What the hell? Have you gone insane?" he asked, his voice carrying a faint mix of shock and anger. A giggle suddenly rang out through the room, coming from none other than Lydia. "Seems like you also don't want your first time taken by a below-average elf. Do you? You're just a brat, after all." Lydia rolled her eyes at him as Ryuk scoffed. "So much for the 'I'll never let you take my first time,'" Ryuk mocked. But Lydia, whom he expected to be suddenly enraged, was surprisingly much calmer. "I wouldn't mind my first time being you," she said, shocking Ryuk into a stupor before he quickly shook his head. Forget that happened. Now, I need you to call up your dad, Ryuk stated, throwing her device toward her. She caught it before sitting on the sofa. Why do you want to get to grade A? Lydia asked curiously, looking at him with interest. I'll tell you after you call up your dad, Ryuk replied. Lydia furrowed her eyebrows at him before shrugging. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. in the morning. A train labeled S0009 will be leaving Central Park. That's one of my dad's trains that will be heading to grade A. S0009 in Central Park. Ryuk mused to himself, storing the information in his head before he snorted. So, you knew where the train was in the first place and just had to make me go through so much trouble, Ryuk muttered as Lydia giggled. Now, tell me, why do you want to get to grade A so badly? She asked once more. Ryuk replied, to meet someone. Who? None of your business. Ryuk shot back as he slowly headed toward the door. But before he could grab the doorknob, she spoke again. What are you doing? Leaving, of course. The train leaves at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's 11:07 p.m. now, and Central Park is just a 20-minute drive from here. Why not spend the night here and leave in the morning? She tilted her head slightly before adding, and maybe change that battle suit of yours with some of the tomboy clothes that the lecherous bastards send me every week. Ryuk thought about it for a while and found that it made some sense. If he left now, the train would leave at 6 a.m., which meant he would have to wait in the dark of night for close to 7 hours. If he was somehow caught or sighted by the Central Park guards, chaos might unfold, and the train schedule might end up being cancelled. In short, many factors could go wrong if he left for Central Park so early. But if he stayed here and left at 5 a.m., he would arrive just in time when the train was preparing to leave. There was a much lower chance of things going wrong that way. Well, you begged me to stay for a night with you, and since you begged so heavily, it would be quite uncouth for me to say no. Hence, my reason for staying, Ryuk said, causing Lydia to roll her eyes before heading toward her room. And really, are you only 17? Lydia asked on a more serious note, as Ryuk followed. If so, you don't look like one at all. You look 20 instead, old man. Ryuk scoffed. At least I'm more of the above-average handsome type and don't have a single wrinkle on my face, old lady. Shut up, you bastard. I don't have a wrinkle on my face. Lydia shot back at him as Ryuk smiled triumphantly. Their bickering echoed through the night as the door to the living room gently closed behind them. The lights on the walls slowly dimmed out, leaving only the one in the center burning gently, whilst slowly turning back to its red hue. Wow, that's a lot, Ryuk said out loud, surprised as the green wardrobe was opened up. An entire line of well-wrapped clothes came pouring out of it. Each of them was still in their sealed nylon, and they numbered in the hundreds, forming a small mountain beneath Ryuk and Lydia's feet. Yeah, he sends them to me once every week. It's been continuing for some years now, so, she said, as Ryuk bent down, opening one of the sealed nylons. But his expression marred when he saw the clothes and looked back at Lydia's figure, who rolled her eyes. Could it be that he doesn't know you're a female or something? Ryuk couldn't help but ask. The cloth he held was a regular shirt and trousers, seemingly made of some high-quality fiber, but there was no doubt about it, it was clothing for males. It would make any female wearing it look like a tomboy. And he sends almost the rest like that, as if, don't tell me. You lied to him about what you like, just to give yourself a reason not to wear them, Ryuk said with furrowed eyebrows as Lydia shrugged. He once bought clothes like this for me when Mother was still around, and I loved it. It was like my favorite. Hence why he keeps sending these after. To him, this is what I love wearing, she said before moving onto her bed, burying herself in her mattress. You can take as much as you like. I'll probably never open them until I grow old. And we elves live for 200 years at least, Lydia said with a loud yawn. Ryuk's eyes lingered on her for a while before he focused back on the clothes, getting himself into a seated position while grabbing one of the clothes, which had a white color. A simple shirt, made of some thick yet fluid material, long-sleeved, with an equal trouser that reached down to the ankle. It was the perfect size, but looking at it, Ryuk's gaze seemed lost in the cloth instead, even though he was staring right at it. Tell me, Uncle Bob, who took everything away from me? Your own family. Uncle Bob's voice resonated through his head as Ryuk's eyes grew cold, before slowly softening. I really wish things turned out differently sometimes, he mused to himself. As mature as he may seem for his age, that didn't mean he couldn't get jealous. He had seen the chemistry between Morgaine and the half-fallen one. Secretly, Ryuk wished for something like that. A tie with one who had the same blood flowing through him, even if it somehow didn't seem perfect at first glance or seemed to have a few obstacles. He wanted one still, and sometimes he just wished things turned out differently. He wished Uncle Bob was still alive. He wished the body he was currently in was his true body. He wished his own family never tried to hurt him. He wished he knew who they were. Even if he ended up only possessing a mortal family, Ryuk would gladly give away all of his current strength just to get that loving life. Hey, you okay? The voice resounded through the room as Ryuk awakened from his thoughts before nodding his head. Yes, I am. Sure? You've been sitting there for 5 minutes now without moving an inch, Lydia asked worriedly. Ryuk shrugged and rose up to his feet. Following him, about 3 of the wrapped clothes rose up before getting stowed away by him, and the remaining ones on the ground all floated up before getting stacked back into the wardrobe. Ryuk shut it close. I'll take 3. Thank you for the offer, Lydia, Ryuk said. Do you still need the money? Lydia suddenly asked, as Ryuk shook his head. No, I don't. I've gotten all I would have used it for anyway. Ryuk mused with indifference as Lydia chuckled. What? You're oddly very easy to satisfy for a human. Majority of them would have still wanted the money on the premise of just in case. Guess I'm part of the minority then? Ryuk stated with a smile before heading out of her room, but he was stopped. The bed is softer than the seats, Lydia said, as Ryuk smiled before replying. A certain grumpy person wouldn't like that. Good night, Miss Lydia, he said before switching off the lights on the way out and locking the door behind him. In the next instant, he took off his battle suit, ice washing over his body, getting rid of any impurities he might have had before they faded into ash in the air. Ryuk then donned the new pair of a simple white shirt and trousers he had picked, giving himself a new look. Not feeling that sleepy, Ryuk moved to the window, looking at the full moon in the sky. In the next instant, the world faded, and a world of ice and snow was revealed, where a figure lay, eyes staring at an enclosed object. What do you think of it, Isha? Ryuk asked as Isha turned her head, finding the familiar figure sitting by her side while staring at the incubator. The void aura is growing stronger with every passing second. Isha voiced her thoughts to Ryuk, who smiled. That means it's surviving, then. What do you think it'll be? He asked. Isha looked furrowed at the pet incubator, her narrowed eyes dimming before she spoke. I can't see much within, but I can see its cup and the liquid it holds, Isha said as Ryuk's eyes flashed in seriousness, and he turned to her. You can see it? He asked in shock. Of course, he knew Isha could see people's potential based on their cups and the liquid in them, but he never expected her to be able to view the cup of a yet-to-hatch beast. Yes, I can. Do you plan on keeping it? Isha suddenly asked, looking dead straight into his eyes. Ryuk matched her gaze for a while before collapsing under their pressure, averting it, before giving his reply. Yes. If it ends up surviving, then yes. I plan to keep it and nurture it, just like I did with you. Ryuk replied, at the same time feeling a weight lifted off his heart. Ever since he had taken the void egg, he had felt a burden on his soul. It wasn't from trying to nurture it, it was from the excuse he would have to give to Isha about his reason for wanting to keep the egg. Just what would he tell her without making it sound as if she was about to be replaced? He knew well that if he outright slammed it in her face without giving a care in the world, Isha wouldn't be able to do anything to him anyway. She would still listen to his command. But that wasn't the type of relationship he wanted with Isha. She wasn't just a beast or a pet to Ryuk. She was like a sister to him, and that was why he feared her reaction and how he might break it to her. Now that he had, the weight somehow lifted off his chest, before multiplying as he stared back at Isha, who looked into his eyes for a while before averting her gaze to look at the pet incubator. Then you're in great luck. The beast cup. It's currently half as big as mine, Isha stated. Ryuk grinned, but then Isha wasn't done. But what? Ryuk asked, seeing Isha's gaze flicker with a bizarre light. It's growing larger with every passing second, Isha stated, causing Ryuk's heart to drop in his stomach. The beast cup is growing? How is that possible? Ryuk stated in shock, unable to believe his ears. Isha might not know, but the beast cup signifies potential. If the egg's cup was half as big as Isha's, then it must have half of Isha's own full potential, which was understandable, since Isha was no doubt a high-grade beast. But if the beast cup was growing, that meant its potential was growing with every passing second? Now that was one big anomaly. What type of beast had its own potential growing? That was supposed to be something set in stone. I don't know either, and it just grew a little more. I have no idea how it's possible myself. Right now, its shape is forming a body, but I still can't see its shape well. It hasn't solidified yet. But in 72 hours, it will have solidified completely and maybe hatch right after. Then you'll see it, Isha stated. Ryuk nodded his head before lying down on the snow, looking at the blue sky of the pet world. Isha looked at him for a while, her gaze flashing with doubt, as if she was struggling in her mind to come to a conclusion on a choice. You know, the last time I came into the Apex realm? Isha suddenly asked, catching Ryuk's attention. Yeah. I found a tree with one part that was dark. Very dark, she said. Ryuk nodded. Yes, it's one of my powers. Unawakened, though. Isha's eyebrows furrowed even more. You know when you faced those nulls back then? Isha asked. Ryuk raised an eyebrow. There was a bright flash of light from the distance, which could have only been from the dark side of the tree. It lighted up brilliantly for a while, only quieting down after you finished the battle. Isha pointed her claw toward the direction where the light ought to have come from. And truly, it was the direction where his primordial tree was. You sure? Ryuk asked as he looked into the distance. Yes, I am. It was a suffocating aura, abnormally evil, and it reeked of chaos, Isha said, a hint of disgust yet caution flashing in her eyes. Ryuk hummed for a while, piecing together a couple of things before he shrugged it off. Don't worry about it. Everything is in my control, Ryuk stated. Isha nodded before settling in the snow, slowly shutting her gaze under Ryuk's head pat. Activate system interface. Congratulations on completing quest. Save the human army from eventual destruction. Plus 5 EXP. Plus 15,000 purchase points. System interface. Name: Ryuk Null. Race: half Null, half Jade Dragon. Class: Beast Sovereign. Age: 17. Apex Energy Cultivation Stage. Initial Plane of Dominion. Aetheris Energy Cultivation Stage. Mid-Stage. Level: 30. EXP: 100,000/33,000. Does host wish to level up? Yes. Congratulations. Host has leveled up to level 41. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Total EXP: 67,000/40,000. Congratulations. Host has leveled up to level 42. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Total EXP: 27,000/43,000. Total attribute points: 20. Level up cards: 5. Does host wish to use level up cards? The system asked, but Ryuk called it off. Right now, I'm as strong as the enemy can get. I'll hold on to my current strength for now and use those when an invisible enemy arrives. The level up cards are 5, and if each gives 20 attribute points, I'll have 100 attribute points just from that. Combined with the 20 I have, that makes 120 attribute points. If I suddenly add all that to my strength in the middle of a battle, then that will be an incredibly powerful game-changer. Ryuk mused to himself, his eyes holding a bit of relief. It really is good to know that not much in the world can harm you any longer. Just earlier today, he had gotten rid of an army of nulls that had been planning to wipe out 7,000 human warriors. The best of the human warriors. Or one could say 7,000 lives. And he had done it without breaking a sweat. It was safe to say that, by Indurtha's standards, he had really grown to become a powerhouse of his own. He wasn't oblivious to his achievements, and now he felt all of the pain in the trial was well worth it. And only one person could be thanked for even bringing him this far. Thank you, system. I owe almost everything to you. Ryuk thought to himself before his eyes shut close. And soon, he faded away from the pet world, opening his eyes to the sight of daybreak slowly approaching. Time to leave. The train S0009 will now begin its movements. All stats have been checked and proven to start. Takeoff will begin in 10 seconds. We of Central Park wish you a safe journey. 19, 9, 8, 6, 7. Who? The sound of a deep exhale rang out, coming from none other than a white-haired figure who stood at the top of a bridge. His white hair rustled from the early morning breeze, but his dual irises were locked onto the batch of moving trains below, especially one, which was currently moving slowly toward the exit line. Train S0009 of the Salvatore Company. Found. Ryuk mused to himself as he looked at the train, painted in a color of green and white, holding the emblem of a leaf, the same one written on the little paper that Ryuk had woven in his hands before slowly releasing it. He had gone out once he sighted daybreak and had scanned around the train station and the Elf City. The emblem of the Salvatore Company had been obtained by him, and now he had matched it with the S0009 train, which bore the same symbol. At the very least, it revealed to him that Lydia might be right, although it was still not confirmed yet. The plan is simple. I get on the train, confirm that it's truly going to Grade A, and ask whoever is in control about the place named Titan City in Grade A, so I know exactly where I'm going. They won't be as easily pleased as Lydia, but I'll make it work somehow. Ryuk mused to himself, preparing to take off when suddenly, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" A voice resounded through the bridge as Ryuk slowly turned his gaze, finding a figure dressed in an enforcer uniform. The elf man's hand reached for his side pocket, where a pistol lay. He gripped it, but didn't fully draw it after Ryuk turned his gaze toward him, and he saw it was just a kid. "Hey kid, this place is an off-limits area. Trying to get in trouble?" The man took a step closer to Ryuk but suddenly stood rooted in place. His body stiffened before he slowly fell backward, his eyes rolling to the back of his head the second his back touched the ground. The breeze blew through the area, sweeping away Ryuk's image that was still sitting on the bridge. In his place, a new Ryuk appeared crouched before the officer, whose unconscious form now bore a handprint on the side of his neck, responsible for knocking him out cold. Ryuk had moved so fast that the man had been struck before he could even process it, collapsing a couple of seconds later. Stretching his hands out, Ryuk picked up the pistol from the man's side pocket before rising back up. He found the S0009 train had moved very far away and was rapidly disappearing into the distance. Now that's one fast train. Ryuk mused to himself before tucking the pistol into his pocket. Then, he levitated off the ground for a few seconds before shooting off into the distance. The world rapidly blurred by, and in the next second, when Ryuk stopped, he was levitating a few meters from the top of the train. His legs slowly touched its surface. Yet, the moment he landed, an alarm blared throughout the train as a deep wave of light suddenly emanated from its walls, scanning Ryuk's figure before fading away before he could react. "Guess I've been discovered." Ryuk mused to himself, then shrugged as he placed both hands on the train. Immediately, he closed his eyes. His nanobots rapidly permeated forth, piercing through the walls and heading toward the inner processor of the train. Ryuk had his eyes set on one goal: eliminate the train stoppers. He ordered as his nanobots got to work. Under Ryuk's precise control, his intelligence pushed to the max, and in a little more than 20 seconds, He had gotten rid of the train's stopping mechanisms. Now, time to head in. An unwelcomed boarder has been discovered on top of the train. All armed forces are to be sent to the second half of the train and eliminate the intruder. The AI alarm voice rang out clearly through the air as the sound of heavy marching resonated through the train. Soldiers, armed with powerful cybernetic uniforms and holding advanced laser guns, rapidly moved out from within the train. The doors opened, and immediately, a powerful storm of air rushed in. But none of the soldiers were knocked off their feet as their shoes suddenly exploded with a powerful flame beneath, instantly propelling them up. They soared, appearing above the train. But there was nobody there. Moving forward, they soon found the reason. The top of the train had been sliced up in a rectangular shape, the cut smooth and precise. It was a clear sign that whoever their intruder was, he had already gone into the train. Immediately, they all went in, soaring forward with speed toward the direction of the cut. Glass and metal flew around, piercing sharply through the air as an object acting as a camera was shot down by Ryuk's pistol before it could capture his image. Unbothered, he proceeded on his way, unfazed, heading deeper and deeper into the train. Soon, he found exactly what he was looking for. A door with the label Pilot Room was clearly written over the iron door, yet there was no knob at all. Slowly, Ryuk stretched his hands out. The surface of the door rippled like water as his nanobots rapidly spread, and just a couple of seconds later, the iron door opened up for him. Ryuk stepped in. The instant he stepped in, he was met with a shower of bullets charging forward with speed. Yet, Ryuk paid them no attention. He kept stepping forward, the bullets halting in the air when they came within 0.2 meters of him. Calmly, Ryuk shut the door back closed, using his nanobots to seal it up so that it wouldn't open anymore, unless he willed it. Now. It can't be that you all haven't realized your efforts are futile, have you? The sound of the pistol clicked, resounding, but no bullet would come out as Ryuk turned his gaze to the three individuals who were currently looking at him, in a mixture of shock and anger. All of the bullets were still hanging in the air, slowly raining down to the ground, and that was all they got. "TCH, you bastard. This is a special train of the Salvatore royalties. Your punishment will be worse than death for." A lanky, middle-aged man tried to threaten, yet his hands reached for his back pocket. But then, boom, the air shook heavily. Blood mixed in with teeth spraying over the area as the man's body was sent tumbling away onto the other side, slamming against the train wall. He carved a human-shaped hole into it before sliding down, a soft splash of red blood following as he landed on his butt with a thump, his head dropping lifelessly. Goran! The only lady among them screamed in horror, but her voice was shut close when she felt a rustle in the air. Turning her gaze, she found a hand magnifying towards her. Instantly, her reaction speed kicked in as she dodged, tilting her head to the side, wanting to sprint for the distance. But Mireille stood in shock when the hand, as cold as death, wrapped around her neck, instantly tightening up. Her eyes bulged as she was helplessly raised into the air, looking in shock and horror at the cold expression below her. "Open the door, pilots. We have tracked the intruder all around the ship to no avail, and this is the only place left. Please open the door for inspection, or we will have no choice but to knock it down in 5, 4. The countdown began from outside as Ryuk slowly turned his gaze to the last pilot in the room. The fat man, whose round face had turned red from horror, had his mouth opened wide enough for Ryuk to fit an egg in. "Pick up the communicator and tell them the intruder has left. Now," Ryuk stated calmly, and Tuyo immediately scrambled for the communicator at the side. With a shaky voice, he followed Ryuk's order. His voice rang clearly to the soldiers outside, who furrowed their eyebrows, but then the knocking on the door stopped, and the sound of retreating footsteps filled the air. "Now that's better than fighting all of the forces at once," Ryuk mused to himself as he turned his attention back to the fat man, the lady still fighting for her life under his iron grip. "What's your name?" Ryuk asked first, as Tuyo unconsciously turned his gaze to the lady, watching green veins snap all over her face, spittle raining down from her lips and nose. Ryuk's grip tightened by the second, and a shudder ran through Tuyo's cowardly spine. I'm Tuyo. I'm leaving you in one piece, Tuyo, and right now, the lives of these two people are in your hands, including yours. Whether they live or die will be based on how well you answer my questions. Got it? Ryuk asked, as calm and indifferent as ever. I understand. Good. Now, the first question. Where is this train heading? Ryuk asked with a smile, and Tuyo's lips moved, but he stopped when a voice rang out. Don't. It was a scream from the lady whom Ryuk was still holding in his hand. Her mouth opened as she bit down hard into Ryuk's arm. But then, boom. The sound of a pistol getting shot resonated through the pilot room as Mirai's side jaw was blown off into nothing but a mash of blood. Her jaw remains and teeth splattered against the wall, and Ryuk watched as thick red veins covered her eyes in horror, a world of pain assaulting her existence, her body jerking for life under his grasp. That could have been her head, Ryuk stated calmly to Tuyo, who bit down on his teeth and roared out. Grade A. It's Grade A. The train is going to Grade A. Salvatore Royal Base. He screamed out in horror, his eyes closed with tears spewing out, unable to look at the horrific condition of his companion, whom he had just been flirting with a few seconds before. Good choice. Second question. Is there a place called Titan City in Grade A? Ryuk asked as Tuyo bit down on his lips and turned to his keyboard, rapidly typing on it. Quickly, Ryuk watched as a map appeared on the screen. An eerie grin spread across his lips, seeing the map to be none other than the map of the entire Grade A. Ryuk even spotted the Ascension Academy among the locations. In one of the locations closer to the Salvatore Royal Base, there was a place labeled Titan City, just as the Apex Watch tracked down. And judging from this, it's just 10,000 miles away from the Salvatore Royal Base. Ryuk mused to himself, getting all the answers he needed. Mad White was in Grade A's Titan City, and Ryuk only needed to get to the Salvatore Royal Base and walk a 10,000-mile distance before he arrived there. Right now, on the map, a blue dot was rapidly heading towards the direction of the Salvatore Royal Base, which he could guess was the train he was currently on. Suddenly, Ryuk raised his pistol forward, and then, experience more content on Novelbin. Calm. Boom. A gunshot resonated through the air, followed by a scream. Tuyo closed his eyes in horror, weeping for his own death, but then he felt himself still breathing. When he turned his gaze to the side, he found the one responsible for the scream. None other than Gorin, the one whom Ryuk had knocked out, was now lying there, his arm blown off his shoulders, and in his severed hand was none other than a small communication device. Ryuk had sensed the weird connection with his nanobots and instantly eliminated the threat before it could begin, leaving Gorin in another world of pain, clenching his teeth as he breathed out for life. You did well, Tuyo, like a true hero, and for your cooperation, I'll spare their lives. Ryuk stated as he dropped the lady in his arms, causing her to collapse on her knees, strange heaving leaving Mirai mouth. Now keep your eyes on the road, Tuyo.